The morning sun shimmered across the calm surface of Old Mill Lake as Ethan stood on his porch, coffee in hand, watching the mist roll over the water. It was peaceful, too peaceful, he thought, for a place about to become a battlefield. The Homeowners Association had been on his case for months, sending letters, making threats, and now, they were taking the next step, calling the police. His crime? Owning the lake, Ethan had recently bought the property, including the old watermill and the surrounding land that the HOA had long treated as community access. For decades, neighbors fished, picnicked, and partied there, assuming it was public. But paperwork told another story. It had always been private. And now it belonged to him. That morning, as two patrol cars rolled up the gravel road, he sighed. He knew who had made the call: Karen Mitchell, the HOA president, a woman who believed rules applied to everyone but her. She stormed out of her SUV, clipboard in hand, her pink visor catching the light. "Mr. Hale," she barked, "you can't just close off the lake. It's community property." Ethan smiled faintly. "Check the county registry, Karen. I own this land. All of it." The officers exchanged awkward looks, realizing the argument wasn't about law, it was about control. But Karen wasn't one to back down easily. As she stormed away, Ethan could almost hear her plotting her next move. What she didn't know was that one simple paper, already signed and ready to file, would soon change everything. 3 days later, Ethan found an official-looking envelope in his mailbox stamped with the HOA's emblem. Inside was a cease and desist notice, accusing him of unauthorized construction, environmental obstruction, and community interference. It was absurd. He hadn't built a thing, he'd just put up a fence marking his property line, but that fence was the symbol of his independence. And Karen hated that. Later that afternoon, she showed up again, flanked by 2 board members. They stood at his gate like an army in pastel polos. "We're not letting you ruin the neighborhood," Karen said sharply. "This lake is ours. Everyone knows that." Ethan kept his calm. "If it's yours," he said evenly, "then show me the deed." Her expression faltered. For the first time, she realized he wasn't bluffing. Still, she doubled down. The HOA filed complaints with the county, the environmental department, and even the sheriff's office, claiming he was blocking emergency access. They tried to bully him through paperwork and intimidation, but Ethan had something stronger: patience and proof. That night, under a golden sunset, he opened his folder one last time, checking the document he'd been holding back. It was an easement revocation, legally closing all HOA access roads across his land, one signature away from ending their lake privileges forever. He smiled faintly. Let's see how they react when they realize the lake parties are officially over. The next week, the HOA held an emergency meeting at the community hall. Karen's voice echoed through the room as she ranted, "He can't just take our lake. We've used it for decades." The residents murmured nervously. Some supported her, but others were tired of the constant drama. "Maybe he's right," one man said quietly. "If it's his land, we can't really stop him." Karen's eyes flared. "Don't you dare take his side." Meanwhile, Ethan stayed calm, watching from a distance as he installed new private property signs and upgraded the fence line. He didn't want to fight, he just wanted peace. But the HOA seemed addicted to control. That night, heavy rain began to fall, turning the dirt paths near the lake into rivers of mud. Ethan checked the old drainage channel the HOA had neglected for years. Water was backing up dangerously close to their side of the neighborhood. He tried to warn them. He even emailed the board, saying, "If you don't clear the drains soon, the lake will flood into your lower properties." No one replied. Karen dismissed his warning in their next meeting. "He's trying to scare us into giving up." But nature doesn't care about pride or paperwork. By the next morning, the lake had risen 2 feet, and the water was creeping into the HOA playground. The storm raged all night. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, the neighborhood looked like a reflection of itself. Streets turned to streams, mailboxes half submerged, lawns swallowed by murky water. Ethan stood by his porch, watching the chaos unfold below. His property sat safe and dry, elevated and protected by natural land grading, something he'd noticed when he bought it. But the HOA homes downhill weren't so lucky. Karen's pristine white fence had collapsed under the pressure of the rising water. Several homes had flooded basements, and cars sat half-drowned in driveways. Within hours, the same police officers returned, this time not for Ethan, but for rescue coordination. Karen stood in her soaked pink visor, screaming orders that no one obeyed. She caught sight of Ethan and stormed toward him, mud splashing around her shoes. "This is your fault," she shouted. "Your lake overflowed." Ethan shook his head calmly. "It's our drainage that failed. I warned you, remember?" Her mouth fell open, but no words came out. She realized too late her arrogance had turned into disaster. As rescue teams helped neighbors evacuate, Ethan quietly made his way to town. He carried that one document, the easement revocation, straight to the county office. He signed it. By law, the HOA had just lost all access rights to Old Mill Lake. Days later, when the floodwater receded, the damage was undeniable. The HOA's lower section looked like a swamp. Mud-caked lawns, broken fences, ruined furniture, thousands of dollars in damage. Karen called an emergency HOA board meeting, but attendance was thin. Most residents were too busy cleaning their homes or too angry to care. When she started blaming Ethan again, one man stood up and snapped, "He warned you, Karen. You laughed at him." Her voice cracked, "He set us up." But even she didn't believe her own words anymore. Meanwhile, Ethan received a letter from the county confirming that all HOA rights to the lake had been officially revoked. The once community lake was now permanently private, his to maintain, his to protect, and his alone to enjoy. Standing on the old mill dock, he watched the sunset shimmer across the calm water. The silence was different now, not peaceful, but heavy. He didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He just whispered to himself, "Maybe now they'll understand what respect means." Karen's HOA newsletter that month was blank except for one line: "All residents are reminded that Old Mill Lake is private property. Access strictly prohibited." A week later, Ethan heard a knock on his door. When he opened it, Karen stood there, no visor, no clipboard, no anger. "Just exhaustion. I came to apologize," she said softly. Ethan hesitated, then stepped aside. She entered, glancing around his modest cabin. "We thought we were protecting the neighborhood. Turns out, we were just protecting our pride." He nodded slowly. Sometimes losing control teaches more than keeping it. Karen sighed. "The residents are angry. They want to rebuild the playground near the lake, but without access, we can't." Ethan walked to the window, looking out at the calm, restored shoreline. "You'll have to find a new spot. The lake's off limits now, for good reason." She looked down, shame in her eyes. "I understand." As she turned to leave, Ethan added, "Karen, I didn't want enemies. I just wanted peace." Her voice was small. "You've earned it." When she walked away, Ethan felt the first real quiet he'd known since moving there. The storm had washed away more than mud, it had cleansed the arrogance that once ruled Old Mill Lake. Months passed. The neighborhood slowly recovered, and Karen eventually resigned as HOA president. The new board reached out to Ethan not with demands, but with a proposal to collaborate on a community project away from the lake. He agreed. Not because he owed them anything, but because he wanted peace to last. The story of the man who took back his lake spread through the county, becoming local legend. Some called him stubborn. Others called him smart. Ethan didn't care what they called him, he'd stood his ground with dignity. Then one morning, he received a letter from the state's Department of Environment. "Due to your efforts in maintaining Old Mill Lake's ecosystem, your property has been recognized as a protected natural site." Ethan smiled. The lake that once divided the community was now preserved forever. As he stood on the dock, watching the reflection of the morning sky, he whispered, "Sometimes, the paper they laugh at is the one that changes everything." And that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.